This is definitely going to be an introductory talk. This is not going to go super deep into technical stuff. The idea here is what we want to do is make this accessible in your mind for just the normal person, right? Whether you use this or not, understanding some of the stuff that the CNCF does can be a little complicated, right? Complicated terminology, complicated stories. You saw the Uber thing, how many millions of things are we migrating? This is rough, right? This is not easy to understand. So I think it's really cool that y'all decided to come and check this out. What we're going to do today is we're going to talk about cloud native OLI and what that looks like at scale. Is everybody familiar with all these funny terminology things you're going to see here? OLI. Anybody heard of OLI? A few, right? Everybody heard of Kubernetes? All right. You know how they call it K8S? You know why they call it K8S? They cut out the 8 letters so on Twitter you can make a really quick tweet, right? That's the idea. OLI's the same thing. Have you ever tried to spell observability? I regretted deeply the day I switched to observability when I tried to start typing out stuff on Twitter. It's not fun. So they call it OLI, O-L-11Y. So don't panic, that's all that is. Then we're going to look at the nuts and bolts of what OpenTelemetry is and what it's not, because there's a lot of things it doesn't do. So was anybody here at KubeCon last week? You're jet lagged like me? So we just got back from that, right? And they did some announcements that I'm going to share with you. So it does a lot more than it did last week. And then we're going to look at how you can get your feet wet if you want to get started. And funny enough, it involves zero coding. So even the managers can get involved with some of the things I'm going to show you. I promise, I promise. So I love this because this is to me what it feels like when they talk about cloud native, right? All the promise of containers. Man, was that fantastic when that first came out. I was a developer. I was so excited. Who doesn't like spinning up shit in 5 seconds on your laptop, right? And then you add Kubernetes in, and it takes a little while to get your head around that you're basically describing a situation that's supposed to happen out there, and then you lose control. So it's a little hard to debug that before you say, okay, go ahead and put it in production. I mean, we've gotten our heads around that a little bit, but it's still difficult, right? People still have a lot of struggles with that. Pandemic was a great equalizer in this, and it shed a lot of light on stuff that was happening inside the Kubernetes stuff because companies out of nowhere became really popular. In America, they have one called DoorDash, Uber Eats, maybe you've heard of. I don't know what they have particularly here. In Holland, it was called, I have to translate it because it's in Dutch, but they call it deliveryathome.nl. You know, that exploded. And some of these things were actually running in Kubernetes environments, which means, hey, we have no limits in production, right? The limits are all in developers and in test environments. They're not in production. So when you do hit success, what's that look like? That looks really expensive, right? Which is great if you're making a lot of money. Nobody's going to complain about it, but that's usually not what's happening. There's a lot of extra stuff you didn't plan on having in there to get spiraled up also. So this is kind of what it feels like. They promise us a lot, but it feels like that moment you feel when your ice cream, look at your kid's face, man, when his ice cream hits the floor. That's what it feels like. Right? But don't panic. We all started out just like this, right? Containers, easy, they're pretty, you're able to get your head around what's going on. It's really not a problem, right? But then, along comes the data problem. And that's a little bit of what I just described. This is a very simple example. In the speaker notes, you can find the link to this. You can Google around the internet and find any one you want. There's lots of examples of these where people have spun up really simple, small cluster, a little fake app, ping it a few times, and then put observability data on it. Like, let's collect like we're observing this. It's not APM, this is like doing it in the cloud, but it's a really, really small use case. 30 days of this crap was 0.5 terabyte of data. How many millions of containers did Uber have? You know what I'm saying? Do you want to pay for that? Is that your credit card? Great example. Right before I left my last job, I was doing a demo for something. I don't remember what it was, but it was Argo CD. It was Kubernetes. We were doing it on a cloud provider. My credit card, right, as a developer, just let's get this done. $800 at the end of the week. It wasn't from my code going back and forth. It was from all the data and the stuff that I'd gone in the marketplace and turned on automatically that by default sends me logs, sends me all kinds of crap I don't care about. But it costs you money. It costs you lots of money. There was a IDC report I saw that said that on average, companies retain that data for 13 months. And generally, we're not all smart enough and savvy enough or have gotten far enough to have like plans in place for different environments. So it's just a blanket statement, 13 months. If you're a credit card company, it's probably 5 years. But what about that training environment you spun up for 2 weeks? and spun it back down, and now you're retaining that data and paying for it. Maybe it's got log data that was just, I don't know, in some kind of test environment that really isn't that important, right? You have to step back and think about what can we do with this stuff. This is a super flood of stuff you don't know what to do with. Costs a lot of money. From the developer side, if you look at it, this is what it ends up looking like eventually when you start scaling out. We got containers everywhere, we got tools everywhere. It's getting a little complicated, isn't it? How many people here are on the observability side? Admins, SREs, true SREs? Ooh, put your hand back up. That's a lot. Only 2? Were you lying? You're also SRE? Okay. So just for fun, I'm going to pick on you 3, not picking on you, but I'm going to ask, how long have you been an SRE? A few months. See, he's still smiling. 2 more back there. How long have you been an SRE? Okay, so a half year, still smiling. I have a colleague that we hired that was an SRE. She says she's the youngest retired SRE on the planet. Had 6 jobs, burned out on all 6. This is not funny. I mean, it's really true. This is what that world is like. It's hard, right? It's a lot of stuff coming at you. A lot of your organization is not listening. They're listening to the developers, not to the observability side. I talked her into coming over and doing what I do now. It's like sharing this stuff and telling their story and helping other people not get into that same pain space, right? And the problem with burning out on this stuff is that you lose the person for longer than 6 months, right? It may take 6 months to come back from that, but then another 6 months before they're kind of stable again. You're ruining it for everybody. It's a really, really tough space to be in. I always ask about the SREs, and if you find one or know one, buy them a beer. It's the least you could do. You know what I'm saying? They're going through a lot of pain for you. It's really hard to keep these organizations running. I once met an SRE in London. Quite funny story. 2 of them again, one in the front, one in the back, just like this. The one in the front had been doing it for about a year. He was still smiling. The one in the back had been doing it 10 years. I never get that answer. 10 years. 10 years of doing this. Unbelievable. I was like, Jesus, how do you do that? And he goes, well, I cheat. I do SRE 1 year, and then I do developer 1 year. So he goes into recovery for a year, and then he comes back to SRE. Isn't that funny? I thought that was great. Great plan. All right, now we get to the observability side. Again, Ollie, observability. When you start out, it looks like this, right? You got everything under control. In the old days, we used to have VMs and application performance management, right? It was really easy. You know how much resources you got, you know how big your machines are, you know when you plug new ones in, how much more you're going to get, that kind of thing. This is in the cloud. It's pretty okay in the beginning. They got nice tools in the marketplace you can click on, and they provide you all kinds of fun stuff to play with. It seems like, oh, this is going really well, right? Then it scales. And this is not a war zone photo. I'm not trying to traumatize anybody, but I've had multiple SREs come up to me and said, it's exactly like that. It's exactly like this. That's got to scare the shit out of you, doesn't it? Not fun. It gets really hard to keep your head around this stuff. The flood of data that's coming in. What do I want to keep? What do I not want to keep? Why would they drop any data at all? And all your vendors, up till now, are mostly making their money because you store what you ingest. So when you actually keep everything, it gets more and more expensive. And all you got to do is look around on the internet and see some of the people complaining about different vendors and how they charge. This is a really, really hard thing to deal with, because what are you going to do when a guy comes up to you and says, you want logs, right? You might need them one day. Sounds like a really solid plan. But the problem is, most of the time when you're doing some kind of incident investigation, I need 1 log, 3 metrics, 2 labels, and that's it, and I know the answer, right? I can solve my problem. But how do you find that in the sea of data? It's really hard. And then you have companies out there that start out in the DevOps world, and let's imagine this is your landscape, and you're over here with all your DevOps people doing all the things you want to do, and you slowly start building out your own infrastructure to do observability. And all of a sudden, more and more people are having to come over here and do this, the bigger it gets. You didn't sign up in DevOps to not do the development for your company and become an infrastructure company to manage it. A really funny story, because we happen to have Uber in the house today. Our founders are from Uber, from the original time series database, and the original first 4 years that they did their observability platform. They built all that. They tell this story all the time, and he actually had a printed article a couple weeks ago about what the size of that would look like and why Uber decides to do that internally with like 450 engineers that run that. And nobody else would do that. He tried to do it in the cloud, right? Their bill, he estimated, would be around 65 million. You know, it's just insane. That's just for the the non-business side of the house. So what you have over here is you're making money, but then you're getting successful, and this costs more than this. What do you do, right? It gets to be a huge problem. Everybody know where this is? Should be easy in Europe. I asked this in America, they're like, I don't know. So when you walk around Barcelona, it doesn't look well organized, does it? It's like any European city. It's old, there's lots of stuff going on. It's really vibrant, there's things everywhere. But if you take a step back and look at it, somebody had a plan. Somebody understands this at scale. This is so nice when you fly in. Pay attention the next time you fly in. It's pretty crazy. All right. That's all the fun and games of settling why we're in this space and what we're talking about, why things are important. This is just to set a baseline of what telemetry is, right? It's the only slide you're going to get from me with a bunch of text on it. So the idea being that we're collecting and transmitting and measuring stuff from all the things in our environment so that we can determine something about them later, right? We want to know what's going on. It's really generic. Now with that, one way to dive into that stuff is with OpenTelemetry. Within the CNCF, there's a bunch of projects, a bunch of different ways to approach this stuff. OpenTelemetry focuses on telemetry data, and most often the words you're going to hear about are around things like spans, tracing stuff, things that happen with microservices in the cloud. They're scattered everywhere. My customer comes in, he does a call, or she, and it goes all different directions, right? You have no idea. Every other call could end up taking a completely different path through your organization. I remember distinctly, like maybe 15 years ago, a buddy of mine was trying to do one of these for a school book online selling platform. And they were having a hell of a time debugging anything, because none of these kind of tools were really in place at the time. So you would shoot something off and then try and figure out where it went, who it called, how long it spent in each service, where the delays were, latency, all that kind of stuff. You can get started here at OpenTelemetry if you want to dig in a little bit more. They have a really unique documentation system, I think. It's really nice. First question you're asked is if you want to go on the operations side or if you want to approach it from the developer side. That's kind of neat. They tailor that for you. One thing you have to understand what it is not, right? It is not a backend, which is weird, right? You think, wait a minute. Everybody jumps in and is all excited to get started. I'm collecting all stuff. Where's it go? You're basically left holding the bag with all your data, like, where do I point this? So what you end up using is things on the back-end system like Prometheus. There's lots of other things, FluentBit, all kinds of FluentD, a lot of stuff in the CNCF that they'll let you use the back-end for. That provides for the storage with the languages you need to write queries, to create dashboards, to create alerts, to create all those kind of engines are supplied by a different project, right? This is just collection. And the real core, they do a whole lot more. I mentioned that last week they announced a bunch of different stuff. So for a little while now, they've also produced metrics. These are traces, and then you also have logs. And last week they announced that they completed the log specification. So in theory, you can now use this to collect all this stuff and then point it to whatever backend system you want to use. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a CNCF open source project, of course. You can also do it into your cloud provider log system if you want to. It doesn't matter. But for this particular talk, to give you the focus of what it originally is about and what the most you're going to hear about from people that use this stuff is about traces and spans. Now, when you think about a trace, it's what we just described, some call that goes all the way from front to back end through a system. We're not really sure where it's all going to go between call A, call B, call C. And then spans is a way to define smaller chunks inside that call. So you're going to be able to see between two services and plots instead of all 10. Right? It's like chunks. We have a visualization for that in a minute. They basically created a specification that has three things, right? We have the API, which has been used by a lot of people, including the SDK, to create automated things for you to use, libraries, right? That automatically start generating stuff based on the environment you work in. Java developers here, there's one for you too. You just turn it on, you get a bunch of free stuff without doing anything. Right? Generally, what people tend to do is go into the code and implement certain aspects that they want to cover as you pass through that service. So you're doing manual telemetry is being added, right? And you also have a special protocol. It's called the OTLP. It's a lot of fun talking to people that talk real fast with this stuff because you can't really understand what they're talking about with the different protocols. But the idea here is you have an open standard that pushes this. And there's a key term there, pushing. So OpenTelemetry is a push protocol. So you have to put something on the side where your apps and services are so it can push it to the back end. Whereas most metric systems and things like Prometheus are pull. Has no impact on you. You can use it with having no impact on what's already deployed. Which is also, again, something you have to think of with a grain of salt because we mentioned manual instrumentation where you go in and change your code, redeploy, and now I have specific stuff that's important to my business being collected and watched and monitored versus using these automated exporters and libraries. You just flip a switch and it starts producing stuff around a Java environment, which may not be really exciting to my business, right? To a developer, it's kind of cool to see all that stuff come out, but it may not all be interesting. Any questions so far? Good. All right, auto instrumentation. Kind of a real simple, pretty picture, right? There's a collector. Kind of obvious if you've been listening to what I've been describing. You have to put something out there to start collecting stuff. It's using the open protocol. So it's ingesting things. And you see within that single system or application, you have the ability to do it different ways. So I listed all three, and I'm showing there the dark blue one is the automated instrumentation library. I just flipped a switch, used the library, and now I'm collecting. You notice it's not going anywhere, it's just going into the collector. Right? Collector is the push mechanism. So now we're going to push it. We push it to the back end. Prometheus, Jaeger, Fluent Bid, whoever you're using, doesn't matter. Make sense? It's not rocket science, right? It's a little harder when you actually do it, but it's not too bad. Lots of documentation. You see here we have one host, a bunch of applications. So we've gone from one app to a bunch of them now, right? It's getting a little bit more complicated. But what do you do when you have a whole region or a whole data center or things like that? Well, now add another layer, a gateway. So he's collecting a bunch of collectors. So it is designed to scale and to do this at high speed. It is also designed to not lose stuff. So there's a lot of stuff that's taken care of for you right up front, right? Very easy. See more hosts, more applications, collecting on each one, collector to the back end. Pretty straightforward, right? Y'all ready to run out of the room and go do it? So I got a little excited. I was in Berlin at PromCon, where the Prometheus conference is at, and they pushed something new out in one of these export libraries. They rewrote the Java one, and it made my life so much simpler from what I had to do to make things happen. And I have a workshop that we've written around this stuff. So I actually ran out of the room and spent 15 minutes updating my stuff to see if it would work, if it was really as easy as the guy on stage was promising. It's this easy. It's really not hard. Documentation is really good. What's happening inside that collector? Because that big blue box, that's kind of fun, but you know, there's got to be some kind of magic happening inside there, right? So there's a lot of things you can do. There's a lot of control that's given to you. You see there that you ingest whatever information is coming in your data, and it gives you the chance to process it, like pre-processing. So you can decide if you want to drop stuff, if you want to cut stuff out, if you only want to select certain elements of things in there. It gives you an upfront control to decide this is important to me. You should have a little bit of a feeling that this is like danger zone because you're now programming or configuring your collector to do something out there. And if you're doing this at scale, are all the collectors doing the exact same thing, or is that just for this host or just this application, or is it just this region? So the management of this gets very interesting. And people, like I said, start out over here with doing what they're doing, and then pretty soon you start to manage a very large infrastructure of observability where you've done stuff like this. And then maybe one of your great intelligent resources decides to leave, and then you have a hard time remembering where you configured what and things like that. That gets a little bit hectic. You got to watch that. And then you define your exporter of where it's going, and that's it, right? I'm pointing at a Prometheus, or I'm pointing at a Jaeger. It has a little bit different interface, so you need to let it know where it's going, right? Now, down into the nitty-gritty. So there's two different ways to look at this. Maybe you're a tree person, or maybe you're a little bit more for the human readable format here. But basically what's happening is it has a unique ID attached to this whole trace you're doing. And over time, it's done all these steps. right? And you can capture information within each one. So imagine these are all individual microservices. And A did a whole lot because it took a long time, but some of the other ones were much quicker. And A might just be blocking and waiting for all the other ones, or not. It really doesn't matter. Does it make sense? No code yet, huh? I haven't lost anybody. Now, when you go to do this at scale, instead of setting that up in each one of your containers yourself or using some image out there, there's actually a pre-baked one. So now you can just say, oh, I don't need to do this by hand. I can do this way, and I get a standard rolled out. It includes all the OpenTelemetry stuff. I just need to, add configuration updates or whatever. So now you can explode your environment, right? Brrr, like really as far as you want to go. This includes the auto instrumentation. There's all different kinds of containers to do that. So Java, whatever language you're doing, Go, it doesn't matter. You can go look at it on the documentation. It's huge. There's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of these things, even for proprietary stuff. So, are we ready to dive right in? See a manager over here rubbing his hands. That's really good. All right. Of course you can go commit code. Of course you can dive in and check out the project and get all crazy like that. That's probably a pretty high bar for a lot of people. So why don't you just step into, you're already here, right? The KDC stuff is part of the CNCF. You saw that they also use a Slack channel for this event. Well, guess what? All these projects have so many Slack channels, so maybe one section of the project is interesting to you. I lately just got involved in an open dashboard project where I just started adding documentation. They asked me, they saw my workshop I made and asked if I'd make documentation out of it. So there are ways to get in easy and low bar if you have time. If not, hang out, listen. There's a lot of chatting going on in these things about what's going on, where the next event is. Maybe logs are your thing, maybe you're a .NET person. You can kind of narrow the noise down to what's interesting to you. And it's a really great way to meet people and to talk about this stuff. We just had the KubeCon stuff. Whether you go or not, that stuff's all online and recorded, so you can watch and pick up on all the new stuff. So in Chicago, they talked about brand new logs specification is finished, and they talked more about the metric stuff. So in theory, you can do metrics, logs, and tracing all through this collector. Again, it pushes. It's a different architecture than you're used to with most of your metrics, but in theory, it's possible. And a lot of the vendors are working really hard to make sure that this protocol and this form of pushing those kind of telemetry information to you is acceptable for them. So not putting their personal collector in the way, you can get rid of that and move to an open source. Who here as an architect doesn't like to have a component in his or her architecture that can be replaced, right? That's the whole idea behind the open standards. You have special interest groups. Right now there's a really interesting one if you want to hang out in. It's been going for about a year. They actually have got something done now. The first time I told this talk, they had nothing done yet. It was just forming up. But they're talking about how to do this across Prometheus, across OpenTelemetry. How can we define a specification for what this is going to look like in observability? What we're collecting, how can we generify that instead of having special things for this one, special things for that one? You have the OTEL protocol, you have a Prometheus thing, you have query languages in different forms on how to query this time series data. So this one's kind of an interesting to listen to. And they're always asking for comments. You can leave a comment and there's your first interaction. It's not hard. We saw a little bit of, and you see the upper right corner there, they didn't lie to you. The JISC is actually in the listing there. There's a ton of companies and nonprofits, and I just picked a few of these. This landscape photo is crazy. You've probably seen them in some kind of developer talk where they do the whole CNCF thing. It's insane. It's unreadable. It's unreadable when you see how many people are involved in this. They do all the KDC stuff. They sponsor all this kind of stuff. It's huge. It's all over the place. So there's got to be something you can find to hang out in and learn about this stuff. If you're interested in seeing and getting a little hands-on with a really simple example, my colleague, who is the burned out SRE, if you want to reach out and tell her, hey, funny story, heard about you in Denmark. You can go here, you can scan that, or to there. It's an online Reveal.js based website kind of workshop. You can do it on your phone right now and just flip through it and see what it's about. about 7 or 8 labs, and you get hands-on and you can see what it is and instrument some stuff and use some of the automated stuff in a very controlled manner, nothing crazy. She has an example app with some doggy photos, so it makes you smile on the way, right? Everybody's happy. A little less stress for the SREs. And then that kind of wraps up what I was going to talk about. I think we're a little bit early. Does anybody have any questions? If you would please scan this and give feedback, that'd make these people really happy, so they have an idea that we didn't waste your time, I hope.
Yeah, if you have any questions, just raise your hand and I'll try to run to you.
So please ask in the back, yes. We can watch him run up the stairs.
Right?
Yeah, it's not really a question, it's an announcement that the CNCF landscape app has been improved and there's a version 2 of it.
Oh.
And I'll post about that now on LinkedIn with the hashtag. So you can click and see that. The old landscape app turned your laptop into a sort of a 747. And it looked like it would take off, but this is a lot more modern and efficient.
Okay,
Yeah.
excellent. I'll have to go check that out. I still don't think I can fit it on the screen, can I? Okay, that's better, I guess, yeah. All right. Generally, when you go there, you start filtering for things that interest you. On the side, there's a filter, and then you can narrow it down.
Do we have more
Anybody
questions?
else? Anything?
Come on. Oh.
Yes, make them run all the way to the top. Got to work for it.
Hi, my name is Eric. I have a question. Maybe it's too tech, but I'll give it a try anyhow. So when you inject these agents,
Yes.
do you do it statically or dynamically while the pod starts?
What do you mean by dynamically?
Well, as a sidecar operator that sees these pods are starting and injecting them, and
So the question, if you didn't understand, was is it dynamic or static? Can you do it dynamic? I think is what he's looking for. Remember the slide I showed you with the Kubernetes operator? That's kind of the hint to the answer of course you can automate that. So you define what you want to spin up. That's, again, how we describe a Kubernetes environment. What happens when this scales? I want every region, I want every area, I want every app, depending upon how I decide to do that, to have OpenTelemetry installed. Of course, you have to put the collector near it in some form. Think of failover on a region. Then you also got to spin up new gateways or realign new gateways, things like that. So yes, it's pretty much the answer.
yeah. My point was also if it's dynamic, if you have thousands of pods in your cluster and you spin up a new cluster, sometimes the operators need to scale as well, because else if you just have one operator handling all those thousands of pods, it really get overloaded, right?
Definitely, yes. So the question is that you need to give it a little time to scale. That's part of the dynamic part of Kubernetes. So the failover isn't, instant ever. Unless you have something running hot on the side, you can just unplug one and plug the other in. I don't know if you've done any basic development where you deploy a new version of your software, and the whole idea is that you have one container running with your software. You deploy the new version of your service. Until this is up and connected, this is taking all the requests. And then this just disappears, and now this has got it. So it's a seamless kind of process. I'm pretty sure you're going to set up your stuff to do the same thing with this. It's just another component in the container for the application. Shouldn't be too crazy.
We have a question up here.
Oh, geez.
Hi, I'm Avi from Lego. Well, we're using Elastic for observability. We're building a container platform, and we've been using it for both logs and metrics. You said that you stressed that it's theoretically possible to do both. We're using both, but we're struggling with the metrics. Could you elaborate on your experience with that? And yeah, are we going the right way? Should we look elsewhere?
So I'd be shocking in saying you're doing it all wrong. No. I'm not going to hack on another competitor of something that my company also does either. So metrics, the question he's having is metrics and logs, and they're struggling with metrics. I'm going to take a guess and say you're struggling with cardinality, right? So let me describe what I mean, and I'm pretty sure this is where it's going. You define a metric. A metric is a name, it's a label or something you want to collect. Underneath that metric, you can add labels. So cardinality means by adding one new label to a metric, when that replicates across my organization, that could be an exponential factor of more data coming in. Sort of goes back to math class. I see people squinting really hard because when I first got into this, I was like, cardinality, why are we talking about that? That's like a math concept, right? But this is definitely a core issue inside of metrics gathering and observability in the cloud native environment. It's one of the easiest ways to blow up your systems, to blow up your observability platform, to blow up your bill. Because the data you collect and the data you store, Elastic is one that stores, wants you to store it. And so the minute you turn around and put metrics in that are bigger, faster, you know, like an ID, like a pod ID you don't care about, generally speaking. I'm not monitoring my pod IDs. So you're looking for tooling that'll allow you to filter out some of this stuff before you persist it. That's something that my company and the guys from Uber that were the original founders of my company learned really quickly and put in place with like a control plane where you can visually see what's coming in live. Provides tooling to show you what you're not touching. So just stop it right there and don't persist it so you don't pay for it, for one. Number two, you're not overloading your dashboards and stuff. Because the minute you do that, add that extra cardinality and it explodes. We call them a cardinality bomb, a cardinality explosion. That means now when I run the same queries to draw a little dial on my dashboard or a graph, he's got to churn through so much more data before he can display it. So you start seeing your dashboard slow down. And now your SREs are getting more stressed. And they're taking longer to figure out what's going on. It spirals out of control. And it's really hard to backtrack then to find out who caused it, where they caused it, what cardinality. There's some tooling in place where you can see change events. So what happened right before this cardinality explosion? Can I see that quickly without going into all the other data? And say, ooh, call that developer. He just did something and added 50 million new labels to my database. And now my databases are churning to try and index all that crap and my dashboards won't load. It's not a rare occurrence. So am I close? Why don't we have a chat, and at the very worst, I'll give you a t-shirt and it'll make you feel better. Find me after this talk.
I think we have room for one last question.
Okay, one last question. Oh, up front, man, you didn't even have to climb.
Okay. Yeah, hi. So we've been hearing about OpenTelemetry for a couple of years, and in my view, it got pushed too early. It wasn't ready to replace Prometheus. It wasn't ready to replace tracing in Jaeger, or it wasn't ready to replace logging because the instrumentation wasn't there, the documentation wasn't there, collectors wasn't there, and the vendors weren't ready. But are they ready now? Is it like, can I replace Prometheus and all my other stuff in my observability stack easily? Like.
Again, easy answer, no. So it's fair enough to say that. So originally, each one of these projects in the CNCF started with a specific goal. Prometheus was pull metrics, only metrics, nothing else, right? It's a metrics store, it's a metrics query language, metrics database, alerting engine, connects to all the dashboarding tools you want out there in open source, fine. The minute you want to go into logging, you need something else. You go to FluentD or FluentBit or whatever. The original start on metrics was, or on traces was open tracing, I think it was called. There's several evolutions of projects that have now been sunset that turned into what we now have in OpenTelemetry. Their focus initially was traces, just traces and spans, that's it, right? Very specific, targeted thing. They even made it even more specific to say, okay, we're going to write a specification around that, the three things I talked about. They have a protocol, but no backend. So it's even more limited. So I could understand your first experiences are like, what the hell? This is like a half-assed start, right? So it's complementary, I would say. Of course, as they go farther, they add more and more. There must be people out there doing metrics, logs, and tracing with this stuff. Generally speaking, organizations that have been around long enough, you're rarely going to step into a place where they do just one thing. You're always going to find a bunch of tools to support that and their needs. So because this open protocol is around so long, all the vendors support it for quite a while, So it's a small jump to add logging specifications. It's a small jump to add the metric stuff. Usually it's N. So Prometheus does its own pull stuff, and it also accepts OpenTelemetry push metrics, only, right? So the metric stuff. What they also will do is take the traces and spans, and you have the ability in OpenTelemetry, goes a little bit deeper, to turn that into a metrics format. So then you're collecting it in the metrics engine, so you can query it with standard ways of way I work in my organization. Everybody knows this query language, so why would I use a different tool? So it's kind of a convoluted answer. I think all this stuff has been ready for a while because it wouldn't be a graduated CNCF project. There's very specific criteria for that, such as having enterprise organizations saying, I use this stuff in production at scale, minimum of 2 or 3, I think. So maybe go back and check it out again. It's been a while, I think. Fair enough on your evaluation initially, you know. I mean, everybody feels that a little bit in the early stages of open source stuff. But I think it's pretty far now. There's a lot of stuff that might be interesting. And it's fair enough to just grab bits and pieces, and I probably talked all the way over my time, didn't I? He's
Just
like,
a little
"Okay,
bit,
stop."
just a little bit.
Okay,
So-
sorry.
Yeah, so thank you very much, Eric. Let's give Eric a big round of applause. Thank you.